So, while waiting for the Singapore Grand Prix to get underway, I was watching some highlights of past races, which led me to 2022, and that was a very chaotic race troubled by rain that caught out multiple drivers, including Lewis and Max, who put up some generational stinkers that day. So, that initially led me to an idea of seeing every Lewis and Max crash, but that is a short list. So, to make it longer, I thought, why don't we rank every single Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen battle? Quick thing to note though, by battle, I mean every time they have fought for position throughout the race, keyword being throughout. There have been times where they have fought each other for like 1 or 2 laps before one overtook and skedaddled in distance. So I'm going to be strict with this and only include races where they were equal on pace and the fight was actually worth watching. The only exception to this rule will be if they crashed randomly instead of battling the whole way through, like what happened in Hungary this year. So before we get to ranking, I want to give a quick shout out to all members of the flock, and if you haven't joined yet, do so we can fight against the FOM Devils. And I also want to announce that at 7,500 subs, there will be something big, so stay tuned for that. So enough yapping, and here is my ranking of every Lewis and Max battle. So before I rank, here's how the ranking is going to go. There will be 5 tiers like always, and from lowest to highest, starting with lowest, we have the frenemies tier, then the rivals tier, then the enemies tier, then the arch nemesis tier, and then finally the generational hatred tier. The tier placements will also be based on how clean the fight was, not how good the fight was, since let's be real, if I did that, all of the fights would be in S tier. So that's why I'm ranking them by the dirtiness of it. So if they fought brilliantly, the lower it will be, and the more incidents and aggression, the higher. Also, this will not literally be everything since 1 or 2 may have slipped my mind, and also sprints will be excluded from the list since I really can't be asked to watch sprint highlights. Anyways, I can't remember anything from 2015 or 2016 of them fighting since I didn't really watch 2015 and I only loosely followed 2016. So, starting with 2017, the first full season of F1 I watched, let's start with nothing. I quite literally watched all the highlights from 2017 to try and jog my memory, but I just couldn't see anything as worthy of this list. But to be fair to myself, I did skim through them towards the end of it, so maybe I did miss something. Anyways, 2018 time, and here we go now, Bahrain 2018. The race was just starting, and entering lap 2, Max wanted to pass Lewis, and entering into turn 1, they made contact, and Max ended up with a puncture and being called a dickhead by Lewis. The first of many crashes start here, but this was relatively calm compared to later on. So for this one, I think a rivals tier is fitting since they did make contact, but it was a little bit of contact. Next, we have Coda 2018, and in the dying laps, Kimi was leading, but Lewis and Max caught up, and it could have been a 3-way fight had Lewis and Max stayed in order, but they fought. And to be fair, it was a great scrap with the 2 drivers since they were battling all throughout Sector 2 and gave us lots and lots of good entertainment. So for this one, I'm feeling a frenemies tier since it was a really respectful fight. Next, we have Brazil 2018, and this was more simpler than Coda. However, they did fight since they were on conflicting strategy, which means we could have seen a fight to the final laps, but keyword is could, since we all remember the tomfoolery of Ocon that day, which robbed us truly. And even though Max did almost catch up in the end, it could have been way closer. So for this one, I'm putting frenemies tier again. 2019 time, and we have 4 races now, so let's start with Monaco 2019, and during the pit stops, Max got a penalty for an unsafe release. However, that did not stop him from fighting for the win, and for a Monaco race, it got tense since Lewis was on a terrorism strat and Max was on a push strat, which means in the closing laps, they were separated by tenths, and exiting the tunnel, Max had to run on Lewis and try to overtake at the chicane where they had minor contact, and ultimately the battle ended there. It was a great battle where both drivers showed their skill through Lewis's defending and Max's aggressiveness, so for this one, I feel a high rivals tier. Next, I choose Hungary since Max started on pole and Lewis was all the way down in P3, and Lewis would fight his way back to Max where they scrapped for a bit. However, Lewis was facing tire deg, so you know the old hammer time strat, and now Max was really under pressure from Lewis. And I mean, look at these guys. Does this look like confidence? Not really. So Lewis overtook, and yeah, another simple one. So for this one, I choose a frenemies tier, and I hope you know that the more we go along, the much higher these placements will be. Next, we have Mexico 2019, and Max, who was butthurt about losing pole, was on a mission. So the first thing he did entering race day, was try and knock Lewis's wing off and try and kill Bottas, but ultimately killed himself instead. Oh, Max. So for this one, I choose the rivals tier since this guy had no other plan but the art of terrorism. But Brazil 2019 would be the opposite since this race was a classic duel between Lewis and Max where there were no crashes or dirty racing, just absolute cinema. If I could, I would play the whole highlights here, but I can't. So go watch Brazil 2019 in full if you haven't. But anyways, I'm going to put this one in enemies tier since I feel like this was the point where most of us knew that a Lewis and Max title battle was inevitable. Now for 2020, and this strange season would be dominated by Lewis and that mighty W11. However, there were many that would argue Max was the best driver that season, since while the RB16 was no slouch, it wasn't a W11, and some of these races were strong arguments like in the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, what a stupid name, where Max was told to back off to save tires, but instead, he said no and chased after Merc where he beat them fair and square, including Lewis. However, they didn't really fight at all, and this is a trend for this season since again, Lewis in that W11 was untouchable. So I'm gonna include it anyways, but spoiler alert, all of these races are frenemies tier. So if you want to see the juicy 2021, skip to here. Anyways, we next have the Eiffel Tower Grand Prix, where it was one of those races where Lewis won from Max by a couple of seconds and the two of them were ahead of everyone else by like 10 seconds plus. Domination from those two, but no fight, so ultimately frenemies tier again. And to round out the boring year, we have Bahrain 2020, and I'm not gonna bother again, so frenemies tier. The season where the tides shifted, the season where time itself would change, the season where the event known as the Infinite Crying started, since to this day, Team LH still bitch about Abu Dhabi, and bro, get over it please for your own mental health. Anyways, we start with Bahrain, and this was an awesome battle where we started foaming at the mouth of the possibility of a Lewis v Max for the title, and it would start with controversy since Max had to give Lewis back the lead after going off track, even though Lewis did it like 20 times before Max, but you get the idea. This one I would say is a rivals tier since it was a great fight, and oh boy, are we about to be in it now. At the very next round in Imola, we had our first incident where at turn 1 lap 1, Max would push Lewis to the curb, and Lewis picked up very minor damage, and this race would ultimately be won by Max comfortably, and now it is official. Lewis v Max is a reality. So for this one, I'm also going to put it in rivals tier since Lewis really had to lock in now, plus the little mini incident at the start. Next, we have Spain 2021, where Max would pull this awesome move going into turn 1, and it was another Hungary situation since Lewis laid the hammer down on Max and ultimately won in the final laps of the race. This one, unlike in Hungary, is going in the rivals tier since the turn 1 move was a bit cheeky and Lewis got his revenge. Now we have France 2021, and now it was getting real. After Lewis looked set to win, Max all of a sudden on the 2-stopper got ahead of Lewis in the final laps and basically did to Lewis what he did to him in Spain, but it was cleaner than in Spain. So for that reason, I'll give it a frenemies tier since it really wasn't too bad. Throw that out the window now, the gloves have officially come off. Entering Silverstone, Lewis was behind on Max by 30 or so points, so in a move I would do in an F1 career mode, he took Max out of the race on lap 1 and won the race, which shrunk the lead back down to like 7 or so points. To be honest, that's a goated move since again, career mode strategy right there. So he gets points for creativity and having zero shame. And I also think for this one, we have our first generational hatred since this really was the beginning of the end. Plus, this guy still has zero shame to this day for that. Speaking of zero shame, it's Max's turn since we are fully off the rails now. Since in Monza, after both Lewis and Max were fed slow stops, they met each other going to turn 1, where Lewis would squeeze Max out, and Max being the lad he is, didn't back out and instead, he would sausage Lewis at the exit of the chicane and quite literally bonked him with the car. And he had the audacity to say that Lewis was overreacting with the neck pain claims after literally having a whole tire fall on his head. That right there is generational hatred. So fittingly enough, we have generational hatred here for this one. Things would go back to normal though in Coda, where they would have another scrap like in 2018 where they were chasing each other for the win. However, Max would get lucky with the back markers giving him DRS. So I think they're cool now, so I'm gonna put this one in frenemies tier. They are not cool. In Brazil 2021, Lewis would get disqualified for his wing being like 0.2 millimeters open, so he was on a charge, and in the race, he caught up to Max where they fought for one lap, and Max, realizing his fate, called upon the teachings of the one and only Osama bin Russell and fully yanked Lewis off the track and said it was hard racing. Yeah, right. I'm going to put this one in the arch nemesis tier since Max was fully starting to lose it now. Jeddah 2021 would be one of the few races where my head was literally hot. I can make a whole video about Jeddah 2021 since it is truly my Roman Empire. From Max and quali to whatever the race was, I don't want to get into detail, just know Lewis was an idiot, Max was an idiot, and he brake tested Lewis for being an idiot. I don't know, man. Obviously, I'm putting this one in generational hatred, but my word, what a headache-inducing race. Now, we enter the day known as the Infinite Crying, where the title was decided, and do you need me to recap the events of the race? Nah, but I think Team LH want me to. On lap 53, Nicholas Latifi spun and crashed, which caused a safety car, and Lewis didn't pit while Max did. However, there were lapped cars in between, and the race was likely to end under safety car with Lewis becoming an 8-time world champion of the world. However, Michael Massey, the race director at the time, excused all lapped cars between Lewis and Max and ended the safety car with 1 lap remaining, which led to Lewis leaving his cheeks wide open for Max, where Max would win the title. So for this one, I think there should be a new tier called the Abu Dhabi tier, and that is where this one goes. Okay, now that 2021 is over, we have 2022, and just for the hell of it, I'm putting Imola 2022 since it really wasn't a battle, it's more like beating a dead horse since Max overtook Lewis by lapping him. Yikes, man. After the season they just had, yikes, man. I'm not ranking it, by the way, I just wanted to remind those people. Anyways, now we have Zandvoort 2022, and Merck were competitive and Lewis was chasing Max for the lead. However, after a safety car confusion bit by Yuki and Valtteri, Max pitted for new tires, and same thing with Woody. However, Lewis clearly learned nothing from Abu Dhabi as he stayed out and lost the battle to Max and George. Man, 2022 has been rough. Anyways, this gets a low frenemies tier. However, in COTA 2022, they really like COTA, don't they? They would fight again, and there was a glimmer of hope that Lewis could potentially win, but nah, Max just stormed off. But those battles where they did fight were great. So for this one, I think frenemies tier is fitting again. Brazil 2022, oh boy. It seems they also love Brazil too, since after a safety car for whatever K-Mag was on, they entered the Senna S's and then they left it broken. This really seemed like a crash for the hell of it since this was extremely avoidable from both sides, mainly Max. So for that reason, I'm putting this one in enemies tier since it just seems now they love crashing for fun. 2023 time, and we have nothing again. This season was won by Max through and through, and Lewis was hardly a factor in any of these. However, we have 2024, and of course, we have Hungary since at this point, Lewis and Max are more attracted to each other out of hatred more than Trump and Biden, and it's getting old, guys. Even GP agrees since he called Max childish for trying to defend himself. So I'm gonna put this one in generational hatred tier since this really happened for the hell of it again. I have a headache. I thought this video would be more fun to do, but I just leave this video like a disappointed parent after their kids fight over nothing. Well, anyways, there was my ranking of every Lewis and Max battle. Again, I'm just disappointed in these two since their early battles were good fun and great to watch. However, as you just saw, the more as time went on, the more they just started crashing for the fun of it. And man, at least crash after having a brilliant scrap, don't just crash on sight. Anyways, let's hope they can mend their issues and become best friends again, or more than friends. Anyways, if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe since that would greatly help me in making better content, and let me know what your favorite Lewis and Max battle is, and as always, have an amazing day.
Good weather for the duck.